The Core Set 2021 pre-release is almost upon us, and whether you'll be heading to a local game store, playing at home with family or friends, or checking out the sealed queues on Magic Arena or Magic Online, you're probably itching to get your hands on the new cards. You also might be wondering what Core Set 2021 has to offer. What are the archetypes and the strategies? What cards should you value highly, and which ones are duds? Well, today we will be diving in and getting a read on how you should approach your sealed pool. I'll cover the basics on how to build a sealed deck, the main differences between sealed and draft, the archetypes of Core 2021, and my picks for some of the top commons to look out for. If you're heading to an event at an LGS, you'll probably want to make sure to be prepared. Your store will have basic lands available, but it's a good idea to bring a deck box, some sleeves, and some dice at the very least. It's handy to have a pen and paper too. Pre-releases can be long events, especially if your store is popular and attracts a lot of players. Take a bottle of water or other drink, some healthy snacks, and be sure to pack anything else you might need. Many places in the world are starting to open up as part of a phased plan to return to normality. If that's the case for you, you might be able to head down and enjoy an event. For most, though, lockdown restrictions will still apply. Just like with Ikoria, at-home pre-release is available. Please check with your local game store on how you can take advantage of this, whether by having pre-release kits delivered to your door or by using a curbside pickup to get your product. Local game stores are doing their best to give excellent customer service in these times, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to keep up your support where possible. Give them a call. Check on social media like Facebook. Find out what they are offering. Pre-release kits are still a fantastic pickup, and I hope very much that you pick some up. A Core 2021 pre-release kit comprises of the following: 6 booster packs of Core 2021, a spin-down D20 die, a code for 6 digital packs on Magic Arena, and a bonus foil date-stamped rare or mythic promo card. I've reviewed pre-release kits before, so I won't be going deep into the value of them today. Suffice it to say, pre-release kits are one of my favorite things. They're generally worth it and a great purchase. As far as fun is concerned, they are an A+. Opening your pool. The first thing to do is open things up and see what you have. There are many ways to open and sort your pool, and I've covered in depth how to do this in a previous video. So if you're a new player, you can check that out. Here, we'll cover things more briefly. As you open packs, the goal is to have sorted your pool by color: white, blue, black, red, green, multicolor, colorless, and lands, and then further split them by cards you would like to play: bombs, removal, strong rares and mythics, and the rest. This simple division of the colored piles into 2 rows is a surefire way to assess how many playables you have in each color. You'll be wanting to do a quick assessment on cards here. No need to be super precise on evaluations, as you only have limited time to build a deck. Building a limited deck is mostly a solved prospect. The general rule is to shoot for 17 lands and 23 spells. When deciding which colors to play, make sure not to focus too much on your bomb cards. Build a deck that will be consistent with the highest proportion of strong cards you're excited to play. It's tempting to do this the other way around, picking a hot rare you would love to play and then trying to force a deck around it. Unfortunately, this is an easy way to end up with a suboptimal deck. And even with the best mythic rare in the set, you're unlikely to win games if the deck supporting it doesn't function. Mana sinks, or recursive cards, tend to be great in sealed. So if you see some, try and fit them in. Capitalize on the variance of other players' pools by playing cards that will let you protect or recast your bombs. It's a good idea to be aware of the main differences between sealed, which is what you are playing at pre-release, and draft. In sealed, synergies will show up less often. This is more obvious when looking for tribal cards or enablers. It'll be a lot harder to brew an optimal red-white dogs deck in sealed, as you might not open any of the good cards that glue this tribe together. Likewise, a deck like Red-Black Sacrifice might open all of the edict effects, but none of the payoffs. You still might open strong individual cards in these archetypes, but on their own, they may be less powerful. With that being the case, individual card strength is more important. Pack Leader, for instance, is still a good 2-drop to play on its own. Its damage prevention clause can protect at least itself, and it can wear auras and +1/+1 counters well as a result. It's not hexproof, but it can swing pretty freely in combat. What a good boy! Because individual card selection is more important, it makes removal that much more important too. Games will be dictated by bombs more often, and so skimping on removal is not something you want to be doing. Ensure that you're playing as much as possible, and where possible, try and play one of your colors that has strong removal. Even if the creatures and other cards you open seem very forgettable, if you open a bunch of Grasp of Darkness and Finishing Blow, you should probably play black as one of your colors. After you've opened your packs and constructed a 40-card minimum deck, you'll be ready to play. Rounds are played best of 3 with a chance to sideboard in between games should you wish. As it's a limited event, the rest of your pool will be your sideboard, so you'll not be restricted to only 15 cards like in constructed formats. On Arena, you'll be able to play with your sealed deck until you get 7 wins or 3 losses, whichever comes first. When constructing your deck, it's important to know the archetypes for the limited environment. Most decks in this format will be 2-color, but look for cards in splash colors that can help complement a strategy. There's plenty of crossover in mechanics, and just because you're in one archetype doesn't mean you can't build your deck to take advantage of other synergies too. The first archetype is White-Blue Flyers. White-Blue Flyers is a classic limited archetype, and like many of the themes you'll find in Core 2021, it's a theme that's easy to recognize and put together. If you've been lucky enough to open Baneslayer Angel or Stormwing Entity, you'll be praying you can build this archetype. Watcher of the Spheres is our signpost uncommon. Wizards puts these cards in to give a clue as to what an archetype is trying to do. Watcher gives us cost reduction on flying creatures, and pumps itself when we play them. The bread and butter of our decks will be cheap evasive creatures like Mistral Singer, Tide Skimmer, and Concordia Pegasus, with Aven Gagglemaster and Roaming Ghostlight topping our curve. Don't be afraid to mix in some other cards that blur the line between archetypes too. Look out for Griffin Airy if you have some Lifegain cards. And creatures like Tome Anima are great in this build too. Don't sleep on Angelic Ascension either. If you have a way to bounce the token created, it's strong removal. But more than that, it's a way to cash in any smaller tokens we create for a 4/4 flyer at instant speed. Next up, let's look at green-white +1/+1 counters. Green-white usually helms a go-wide strategy, but we've got a bit of a mix-up in Core 2021, with Conclave Mentor indicating a +1/+1 counter strategy. In that case, it's time to go tall instead. Invigorating Surge is a combat trick that can get better the longer the game goes, while Light of Promise turns any creature into an Ajani's Pridemate, but better. If we have a lot of crossover in our pool with the White Lifegain payoffs, then Truffle Snout becomes a prize pig. Quarian Dryad is a grower and rewards us with counters for just casting spells, even if they're splashed in another color. Mana Sinks are great in sealed, so run all the copies of Tempered Veteran that you can. Pride Malkin is a standout card we really want to be opening here, as any form of evasion makes our creatures with counters that much more lethal. Colossal Dreadmaw is the perfect green common, which is why it gets reprinted again and again. And we should play any creatures with trample or flying that we open. It's generally good to take this approach anyway, but it's more important when we're using +1/+1 counters. Setessan Training wouldn't go amiss here either. Suffice it to say, if you opened Basri Ket or Basri's Lieutenant, you'll be keen to take advantage of them in a green-white shell if you can. Red-white dogs, go wide. Alpine Houndmaster tells us the go-wide strategy is in red-white for this set, which also houses a dog tribal theme. Bolthound communicates this pretty well too. Any strong evasive white creatures we've already mentioned fit into this deck great, but you'll want to complement them with more raw power than in the blue-white flyers build. Daybreak Charger is a strong 2-drop, and when combined with the likes of Gale Swooper, offers a nice 1-2 punch of effects to bolster your attacks. Battle Rattle Shaman encourages us to keep attacking, and can give any creatures we have with First Strike added lethality. Siege Striker pairs with the Goblin well, and a copy of Sure Strike makes our strategy more consistent. Cards like Selfless Savior and Seasoned Hollowblade encourage us to lean into the all-or-nothing strategy, and Burn Bright is our reward for doing so. Even if some of our smaller creatures bite the dust, they've helped take the heat off our other bodies that can still get in for damage. If you're lucky and open Sabira Tulzidi Caravaner, you might be onto a winner. The next archetype we'll be looking at is White-Black Lifegain. Indulging Patrician has quite possibly one of the most gorgeous arts in the set. It's a vampire that rewards us for gaining 3 or more life in a turn by dropping the life total of an opponent by 3. It's great inevitability and will require our deck to be heavily favoring life gain effects. Cards like Avon Gagglemaster and Faith's Fetters are cards we already want to be playing, and Gloomsower is an expensive but powerful finisher that is better in a sealed environment. Cards like Basri's Acolyte and Archfiend's Vessel are playable outside of green-white or red-black Sacrifice, and having lifelink makes them even more playable if this is the strategy we're zoned in on. Lifelink doesn't tend to be on larger creatures at lower rarities in Limited, so we'll have to play our copies of Alchemist's Gift to help get life totals moving a little more. These decks tend to prefer heavy amounts of removal paired with repeatable drain effects to win a war of attrition. There's plenty of common black removal and rewards for recycling your bodies. Try out a combination of Village Rites and Sanguine Indulgence and see how far you get. Things will really come together if you can play cards like Mangara the Diplomat, Hooded Blightfang, and Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. What about Black-Red Sacrifice? The Black-Red Sacrifice deck is another mainstay of core sets, and the goal is simple. Sacrifice your creatures for powerful effects, and if you can, sacrifice your opponent's creatures too. Rares like Liliana's Standard Bearer and Gadrak the Crown Scourge really help push this deck over the top. But it's the quantity of synergistic commons and uncommons you get that truly make or break this archetype. Skyscanner, for that matter, probably peaks in this archetype. Direfleet Warmonger is our signpost uncommon and can swing as early as turn 4 as a 5/5 Trampler, which can be a real beating if we manage to keep up the assault. Archfiend's Vessel, Liliana's Devotee, Deathbloom Thallid, and Goblin Wizardry all help us get multiple bodies to keep going, while the likes of Gourmand and Havoc Gesture pull us into the archetype all on their own. If we can, we want to be sacrificing for value. So Village Rites is a premium pick. There's no active treason at common, so we'll have to make do with Traitorous Greed instead. The bonus 2 mana we get back for casting the spell is not to be sniffed at. Provided we use it before it empties from our pool, it can enable us to cast another spell like the aforementioned Village Rites, or just help us cast whatever we're splashing for. Red-Black can also be played in a more aggressive style with plenty of removal and combat tricks. Pitchburn Devils is a great card here that makes blocking or removing it problematic for the opponent. And we're free to embrace some of the go-wide cards from Red-White, or some of the burn that might seem designed more for the blue-red spells deck. Spellgorger Weird is an example of a card that's good across these archetypes. So if you're looking to round things out, you could do a lot worse. Next, let's look at Red-Blue Spells. Red-Blue Spells is an archetype that's always a blast to play. It's one of my favorites, so if I can offer one piece of advice, I'd say to watch your creature count. It's easy to slip in one too many non-creature spells. There's nothing more embarrassing, though, than dying to a 2-drop backed up with counter magic or protection when you don't have a blocker. Experimental Overload is our signpost uncommon here. It's telling us to play plenty of instants and sorceries and offering recursion with the token as a reward. That's a pretty exciting prospect. The already mentioned Spellgorger Weird is right at home in this build, and you'll want to pair it with Jeskai Elder and Riddle Form to go on the offensive. Removal like Shock, Soul Seer, and Capture Sphere will answer most problems, but cards like Rewind and Tolarian Kraken really start to shine in Izzet builds that are capable of big tempo swings. A lot of your wins will come about by using blue's great evasive creatures in combination with red pingers like Chandra's Magmut and as much interaction as you can muster. Shipwreck Dowser can let us replay our best spells, and playing multiple copies of Frantic Inventory seems like a good bet. Let's move on to red-green Ferocious. While not a named mechanic, Ferocious, which debuted in Khans of Tarkir, rewards us for having creatures of power 4 or greater in our decks. The signpost uncommon, Leafkin Avenger, has a mana ability that adds green for each creature we control with power 4 or greater, and also comes with an excellent late-game mana sink. Red-green is all about raw power in this archetype, and you'll want to fill your early curve with high-powered creatures like Onake Ogre and Burl Fist Oak, which triggers when we draw a card for turn as well. If you're lucky, Garruk's Harbinger and Gadak the Crowned Scourge can really get things going. There simply aren't that many 4-power creatures at less than 4 mana, though, so there's a lot of overlap with the +1/+1 counters theme in order to help us trigger Ferocious, and the more ramp-focused aspects of blue-green that help us cast our bigger creatures. Cards like Cultivate will help us ramp, while Fierce Empath can gum up the ground whilst searching out one of our game-ending bodies. The timeless Colossal Dreadmore fits right at home in this deck, and you'll be running it alongside the likes of Garruk's Uprising, Wildwood Scourge, and Unleash Fury. Ornery Dilophosaur and Drowsing Pteranodon are nice payoffs, but be sure to fill your deck with ways to get these creatures online on their own, like Hunter's Edge or Invigorating Surge. Next, let's look at the blue-green card draw archetype. Lorescalecoatl is our signpost card for blue-green, and it asks very little of us. Nothing, in fact, beyond keeping it in play. Whenever we draw cards, including in our draw step, this thing gets bigger. Cards that might draw us into this archetype are Jolreal, Azusa, Lost But Seeking, Elder Gargaroth, or Teferi, Master of Time. Buffs to creatures like Burlfist Oak and Gnarled Sage provide extra potency, while your creatures and spells like Library Larcenist, Llanowar Visionary, Tide Skimmer, and Reign of Revelation will help you draw cards in abundance. This deck can end up either closer to blue-red spells, using instant speed spells to interact and draw cards, or more of a ramp-based deck like red-green. Either way, you'll be ending the game with fatties, whether they be the likes of Tolarian Kraken, Spined Megalodon, Waker of Waves, or, yep, Colossal Dreadmaw. The black-green Morbid archetype. Another deck that uses a mechanic not named in the set, black-green is concerned with triggering Morbid, a mechanic from the Innistrad block. Essentially, if a creature has died this turn, you'll get a bonus effect. Our Signpost uncommon, Twin Blade Assassins, lets us draw a card if we meet this condition. Take note, it can be a creature on either side of the board, so whether we embrace self-sacrifice or just play a bunch of removal, we should be able to get some added value. Cards like Gourmand and Liliana's Devotee should push you in this direction. And creatures that sacrifice themselves, like Silver Smoke Ghoul, will increase your deck's consistency. Witch's Cauldron is obviously a great build-around, and your deck should aim to keep the cards flowing. Green-black is one of the most likely color combinations to both want to and be able to splash. So if you have access to plenty of card draw, some tapped lands, and a Sky Scanner, you probably have more room to be flexible than, say, red-white. The final archetype that I want to look at before we examine the top commons in each color is blue-black graveyards. Of the themes on offer, blue-black seems the least coherent. It's not quite mill, it's not quite control, and it's not quite all in the graveyard. The signpost uncommon is Obsessive Stitcher, which indicates we want to sculpt our hand while taking advantage of the graveyard. Rather than being a strictly Graveyard Matters theme, I think the build of this deck will differ depending on the synergies you tend to open. Whether you're using cards like Rise Again, Shipwreck Douser, and Sanguine Indulgence to use the graveyard as an extended hand, or leaning heavily into efficient creatures and removal, the deck's strength will be contingent on the quality of individual cards. I've compiled my favorite common cards as a snapshot of what you should be looking for in your colors to really round out a deck. In white, I feel the top commons are Feat of Resistance, which offers great protection for your most valuable creatures, Secure the Scene, which can get rid of just about anything you're concerned about, whether planeswalker, enchantment, or creature, and Valorous Steed, which offers 2 reasonable bodies for 5 mana that are perfect for either going wide or tall, or just gumming up the ground. In blue, Mistral Singer is a Wind Drake with upside that'll happily take up slots in the bulk of your deck. Lofty Denial is an easy-to-cast counterspell that asks very little of the blue-white deck in order for a great boost in potency, while Rousing Reed is a solid aura that more than replaces itself. Putting one of these on a Spined Megalodon is sure to end games quickly. In black, you'll be looking for card draw and removal. Finishing Blow is your staple removal that's easy to splash for, while Grasp of Darkness is super efficient provided you're committed to black. Village Rites might look a little unassuming, but is a good way to cash in on a creature that's about to be removed, or simply outclassed. It's also a really cheap way to enable the black-red sacrifice deck. In red, you'll want to keep an eye out for Chandra's Magmut. It's a 2/2 for 2, which is fine, but in the late game, it isn't a dead card, as it'll be able to slowly chip away at an opponent's life total. Scorching Dragonfire is an efficient burn spell for just 1 and a red, and Spellgorger Weird is one of the premier creatures to run in any spell-heavy deck, whether it's in the Prowess build or simply a combat trick removal heavy red-white or black-red deck. Green has rolled Llanowar Elves and Elvish Visionary into one card, and having a mana dork that replaces itself as a solid prospect in Llanowar Visionary. Ranger's Guile can help to protect whatever you ramp out, and Track Down is really great in Sealed at fixing your upcoming draws. After all, nobody wants to get flooded. Before we close things off, let's touch briefly on how good the fixing is in this set. Between the rare land cycle of Temples and the common land cycle of Taplands, and the chance to open Solemn Simulacrum too, it's going to be pretty easy to adjust your mana base provided you open the right cards. Skyscanner and Meteorite will help a lot with your fixing for non-green decks too. Beyond being lucky in opening Cultivate, the ability for base green decks that splash colors is not quite as high as it is in other sets. Mostly because the mana dorks in the set tend to tap for only green and not mana of other colors. But if you do open, say, a Bloodfell Caves and a Dismal Backwater, then adding a swamp or two to your blue-red spells deck will give you enough black sources to run your 2 copies of Finishing Blow without much trouble at all. After all, pre-release is a time to enjoy Magic. Remember that, unlike Draft, you won't have an opportunity to affect the cards you can pull into your pool to build from. It's just chance and depends entirely on what's in the packs in front of you. Remember to prioritize individual card quality and removal, and you should be in a good place. And I hope very much that this video has put you in a good place for pre-release of Core 2021. You can help me out by remembering to like, share with a friend especially, or just by hitting subscribe and leaving a comment. Are you planning on picking up pre-release kits for Core 2021? Have you in the past, or will this be your first pre-release? Let me know in the comments below. Is mana curve. You want to be able to cast a creature every turn if possible. Therefore, you want to have creatures of varying mana costs. If you were to line your creatures up by their converted mana cost, how many 1-drops would you have? 2 drops, 3 drops. Drafting aggro means drafting to fill holes in your mana curve, specifically at the lower levels. If you have no 2 or 3 drop creatures, or only 1, then looking for a 2 or 3 drop aggro creature is important,